My dad cut me out of his will. So I told everyone why part one, the will that changed everything. I always knew my family wasn't perfect. But I believed we had a kind of unspoken pact. Keep things civil, don't stir the pot, and when it matters. Most we show up for each other, especially when it came to my dad. He was old fashioned, emotionally distant, but we had our way of connecting. I wasn't the kind of daughter who expected hugs and heartfelt talks, but I was there. Always. I cooked his meals when he got sick. I managed his medications. I drove him to every doctor's appointment, every chemotherapy session, and sat in. Silent waiting rooms while the color drained from his face. So when he died, I was devastated. But I was also proud of myself for how I'd been there for him. That lasted exactly 2 days. Because 2 days after the funeral, we gathered in a stuffy little law office to read his will. And that's when I found out I wasn't in it. The lawyer, this uncomfortable looking man in wireframe glasses, read the will like it was just another Tuesday. And maybe for him it was. But for me, every sentence landed like a punch. He left the house, the savings, the car, and the contents of 2 separate investment accounts to my half sister, Hannah. Not even mentioned. Not a dollar, not a photo, not a note. Just erased. Now. Let me explain something about Hannah. She's 6 years younger than me. We share the same dad, but she grew up with her mom, my dad's second wife. I had moved out when I was 18 and never lived with Hannah full time. But I was around holidays, birthdays, weekends when I'd come over to mow the lawn because dad's back couldn't handle it. We were never close, but we were never hostile either. Or so, I thought. But when the will was read, Hannah didn't even look surprised. She folded the paper once, neatly, and slid it into her purse like she'd been expecting it. That's when it hit me. She knew. She knew I was cut out, maybe for months, maybe longer, and she hadn't said a word. That night I drove home numb, not angry yet, just in shock. I sat in my driveway with the engine running, trying to replay every moment from the past year. The hospital visits, the times he held my hand without speaking, the day he told me I was his rock. What was I missing? Why would he do this? I spent the next few days spiraling between grief and fury. I thought about calling Hannah, but I knew what she'd say. Dad made his choice. There's nothing I can do. And legally, she was right, but emotionally, morally, it felt like betrayal. And then something happened that tipped everything over the edge. 3 days later, Hannah posted on Facebook a photo of her in front of my dad's house, holding up a champagne glass with the caption, "New beginnings. Thank you, Dad. I'll take good care of it." The comment section was full of hearts and "You deserve it" from her friends. I saw red. That was my childhood home, my memories. And this wasn't grief. This was gloating. So I commented, "Glad you're celebrating." Some of us are still grieving. She deleted my comment in under 2 minutes. That's when I knew something was off. Not just hurtful off. Because I remembered something Dad said 2 weeks before he died. We were sitting on the back porch, his skin pale and dry, wrapped in 2 blankets, even though it was warm. He'd looked at me and said, "There are things I regret. I should have said more, but you'll understand one day when the truth comes out." At the time, I thought he meant life, regret, death. Now I wasn't so sure. So I decided to dig. The first thing I did was call his lawyer, not the guy who read the will, the one who'd helped Dad with legal stuff over the years. A woman named Janet. She didn't work with estates anymore, but I asked if we could talk. She was hesitant, but agreed to meet for coffee, and I told her I'd been left out of the will. She went completely silent. Then she said, "That doesn't make sense. Your dad updated his will 6 months before he passed. I helped draft it. You were in it. 50-50 split between you and Hannah." I froze. "Are you sure?" She nodded. He insisted. Said he wanted it to be fair. I even remember him saying, "Hannah's had more financial support growing up, but I want both my girls to have a foundation." That's when my heart started pounding, because that version of the will wasn't the one that got read. I went home and pulled out every old email I had from Dad. I checked every envelope, every folder. Finally, in a drawer in his desk, I found something. A scanned copy of a will dated 6 months before he died. Dot in it. I was named. Plain as day. But that's not the version the lawyer had got. So what happened in those final weeks? And who had access to his papers? Hannah Dot. She was the only one who visited him daily besides me. She handled a lot of paperwork near the end, paid bills, dealt with hospice nurses, even slept over the last 2 nights. At the time, I was grateful. I thought she was helping Dot now. I was starting to think she'd done something else entirely. I called Janet again and asked her something I already suspected. Did anyone request a change to the will after your draft? She hesitated. Yes, she said slowly, but not through me. Someone called the firm, said Mr. Whitaker was too ill to come in and that the changes would be handled by a different attorney. We assumed he changed firms. He didn't. He was dying. Someone else changed the will. And I was going to find out who dot part two. The will wasn't the only thing that got erased after I hung up with Janet. I just sat there for a long time, staring at my dad's old desk. Like, it had betrayed me. Dot the copy I'd found, the one with my name on it, was scanned and unsigned. Not official. It had a date. It had structure. It looked legitimate, but it wouldn't hold in court. Not against the notarized version Hannah's lawyer had produced. Still, it proved one thing beyond doubt. Dot. At one point, my father intended to split everything evenly. And now that version of the will had vanished, replaced by something he never discussed with me. Something no one could confirm he approved. Unless you asked Hannah Dot, and suddenly I realized something else that my dad didn't own a printer in the last few months of his life. His tremors were bad. His mind wandered. Some days he couldn't remember what month it was. There's no way he wrote up a new will, got it properly witnessed and notarized, and submitted it to a new lawyer by himself. He had help, or more. Likely someone did it for him. I decided to play dumb. I called Hannah. I kept my voice calm. I said I'd been thinking about Dad a lot, going through old papers, and that I came across a draft of an older will, one we were both named. She didn't respond at first. Then she said, Dad changed his mind. I guess he just wanted to keep things simple. That sentence clung to my brain like poison. Dot simple. Cutting your own daughter out of everything? That's simple. I pushed a little, asked if she knew who. Helped him draft the final version. Dot. There was a pause. And she said, some guy from Mom's church helped. A lawyer friend. Dad didn't really trust his old attorney anymore. That was a lie. My dad didn't even like church. And he trusted Janet more than anyone when it came to legal stuff. I knew because he said it all the time. Janet doesn't let anyone screw me over. So now Hannah had lied directly and handed me my next clue. I did a deep dive. Started by calling the office that issued the final will. Asked for a verification of the notary and witnesses. They gave me the names. One stood out immediately. Ellen Parker. That's Hannah's godmother. She's not a lawyer. She's a notary public in some suburban office outside the city. Then I checked the name of the attorney who had handled the draft. Michael Renner. No license to practice law. In our state, not even a legal background. Just a consultant for an estate planning company that's specialized in, and I'm quoting their site, simplifying complicated family transitions. Translation: they wrote cheap, templated wills for people who didn't know better, or people who wanted something signed fast without asking questions. I wasn't ready to accuse Hannah. Not yet. I needed one more thing, something that would prove. Dad never saw that final version. Dot, so I went back to his hospice nurse. Her name was Margot. She'd been there almost every day the last month of his life. I remembered her well, calm, warm, always called me sweetheart. She hugged me at the funeral. I called her and asked if she remembered anything. About legal paperwork in the final weeks. Dot. She hesitated. Dot. Then she said, there was one day. He was really weak. Hannah brought a folder and said he just needed to sign a few documents. He was barely awake. I asked if he wanted me to read it to him, but she said it was just insurance stuff, and that was it. That was the moment. Dot. Hannah had slipped a new will in while he was barely conscious and lied about what it was. I thanked Margot, hung up, and sat there in my car with my hand shaking. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was manipulation, possibly fraud, and I had no idea what to do with that. I tried talking to my mom. She and my dad divorced years ago, but she still had a kind of distant affection for him. I thought maybe she'd talk me down, tell me I was reading too much into it, but instead, when I told her everything, she went very quiet. Then she said, "Your father told me once that he worried Hannah only came around for money, that she never visited unless she needed something." I asked when he said that. Last year, around Christmas. He was angry she didn't show up until January, then asked him to co-sign on a loan. My blood ran cold because 3 weeks after that conversation, according to the date on the new will, she got him to sign everything over to her. I knew I couldn't let this go. Even if I didn't want the money, even if I didn't want the house, this wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about the fact that my father was used, lied to, manipulated at the end of his life by someone he trusted, someone who should have protected him. I went back to Janet, showed her everything I gathered, the old draft, the names on the new document, the notary connection, the nurse's statement. She looked over the paperwork, then leaned back and said, "This is enough to raise serious questions. We can challenge it in probate, but it'll get ugly." I asked her, "What do?" "You mean by ugly?" She didn't even blink. "Your sister will have to answer under oath. If we push this, she'd be investigated for undue influence, possibly even fraud." I nodded. "Then let's do it." A week later, I sent Hannah a message. It was short. "I know what you did. I have evidence. You have one chance to come clean, or we do this in court." She read it within minutes. Then she blocked me. That was all I needed. We filed the paperwork to open a formal dispute on the will. And just like that, the family drama that had been whispered behind closed doors started spilling into courtrooms and inboxes. People started asking questions. Relatives who'd seen my dad cry during chemo were now finding out he'd suddenly changed his mind to cut out his oldest daughter in favor of the one who barely visited. It didn't add up. And Hannah, for the first time since the funeral, she started panicking. Part 3, under oath. The truth cracked open. Filing the legal challenge wasn't instant drama. It was slow, procedural, and honestly exhausting. But once we submitted the will dispute to probate court, the silence around my dad's estate shattered. Suddenly, lawyers were calling. Emails were coming in daily. Hannah's attorney reached out first, acting surprised, saying, "We believe the will reflects Mr. Whitaker's clear intentions. There's no reason for this challenge." I didn't respond directly. My lawyer, Janet, did. And she sent them a neat chronological packet of everything we had. The previous will draft, where I was clearly named the names of the questionable notary, and the unlicensed estate consultant, a signed written statement from the hospice nurse, Margot, and an affidavit from Janet herself, stating under penalty of perjury that my father had updated his will with her, intending to split everything. Between me and Hannah, there was no spin that could make this all go away. The timeline alone made the official version suspicious. And now, it was all headed to court. Hannah didn't reach out. She didn't apologize. She didn't even try to explain. But her mask started to slip in public. My aunt, my dad's sister, called me out of the blue and said, "Hannah's saying you're just bitter and jealous. That dad left you out because you were never around." I almost laughed. I told her I was the one holding his hand when he passed. Hannah hadn't even been there for 2 days. Then I sent her the nurse's signed statement. She didn't respond immediately. But later that night, she messaged me, "I'm sorry. I had no idea." This changes everything. And slowly, people began to turn. Then came the first hearing. It wasn't dramatic. No slamming of gavels or shouting. Just the probate judge, a clerk, both legal teams, and silence that felt heavy enough to crush bone. Hannah showed up, looking like a Pinterest funeral board. Flawless makeup, pearl earrings, a black blazer. Her expression was pure wounded victim. She looked at me once for a second, then looked away like I didn't exist. But when the judge asked the first round of questions, things got tense fast. He asked her attorney, "Can you confirm who drafted the final will and under what conditions it was signed?" Her lawyer tried to keep it vague, said the will had been professionally executed. That's when Janet stood up and said, "Your Honor, the will in question was not drafted by any licensed attorney in this state. It was processed by non-practicing consultant affiliated with the decedent's other daughter. Furthermore, we have evidence the will was presented to Mr. Whitaker while he was medically incapacitated." The judge raised his eyebrows. He looked directly at Hannah. Double quotes, "Ms. Whitaker, were you present when your father signed the document?" Hannah's voice cracked just slightly. "Yes, but I didn't pressure him." "Did you explain where he was?" "Signing. It was ... a will. He knew what it was." Then Janet passed forward Margot's statement. The judge read it in silence. Then looked at Hannah again. "So why did the hospice nurse write that your father was barely responsive and that you told her it was insurance paperwork?" Hannah stammered. "I don't remember saying that." She must have misunderstood. It wasn't a total collapse, but I could see it. Her hand started twitching in her lap. Her leg bounced beneath the table. The performance was cracking. The judge didn't make a ruling that day. It would take a second hearing, plus additional testimony, before any decisions were finalized. But after court, I walked outside and saw something I'll never forget. Hannah was standing with her lawyer under a tree. Her hands were shaking. She kept asking, "What if they take everything?" Her voice wasn't sad. It was scared. And suddenly, I saw her for who she really was. Not some mastermind. Not a cold villain. Just a desperate woman who thought she could rewrite the story and got caught. A few days later, I was contacted by an old friend of my dad's, a man named Ron who I hadn't seen since I was a kid. He'd heard about the will dispute from someone in town and said, "I thought you should know your dad told me over beers last year that he was leaving everything equally." He said, "They're both my girls, even if they're different. I owe them that much." I asked if he'd be willing to write a statement. He said yes without hesitation. Then another name came forward, one of the men who used to help my dad with financial planning. He still had emails from my dad asking how to fairly divide assets between both daughters. There it was again. Both daughters, not one. The wall was collapsing. The second hearing was more serious, this time. The judge asked both sides to submit final arguments and evidence. Hannah looked tired, smaller. She didn't wear makeup this time. Her lawyer asked for compassion, explaining the emotional toll this had taken on her. But the judge didn't look sympathetic. He said, "This isn't about emotion. This is about intent. The decedents, and right now, there is significant, credible doubt as to whether the final will reflects that intent." Then he turned to me, double quotes, "Miss Whitaker, if this will is deemed invalid, are you prepared to resume the original terms of the earlier draft?" I nodded. "I don't want more. I just want what was supposed to be fair." And finally, the judge gave his preliminary ruling. This court finds the current will questionable due to suspicious circumstances, potential undue influence, and conflicting documentation. I am ordering a full probate investigation and temporary freeze on asset transfers until a final decision is reached. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled outside the courthouse. Hannah approached me, no lawyer. No script, just her, looking like a ghost of the woman who toasted champagne in front of our dad's house. She said, "You don't understand what it was like. I had nothing. He gave me everything growing up." I stared at her. Everything. She nodded, crying now. "Always said he loved you more. I just wanted something for myself, something permanent." I didn't say anything. Because in that moment, I finally understood. She'd spent her whole life believing she was second place. And when Dad got sick, she saw her last chance to take the lead. But she didn't just take more. She tried to erase me, and now she had to live with that. The judge's final decision was set for the following month. But at that point, the damage to Hannah's image and the strength of the case was already too much to ignore. She made one last move. She offered a private settlement. Part 4. The final truth everyone had to hear. The offer came quietly. A week before the final ruling, Hannah's attorney sent Janet an email. It was formal, stiff, almost ashamed. My client is prepared to offer an equal division of assets in exchange for full withdrawal of the legal challenge and no further public action. They wanted to settle to avoid the court's final decision. To save face, they were offering exactly what I would have received if the original will had stood. For a second, I almost said yes because I was tired of the paperwork, the court dates, the whispered rumors in town, the weight of betrayal. I had been waking up every day with this case hanging over me like a fog. Part of me just wanted it to end up, but then I thought about what it meant. Hannah wasn't apologizing. She wasn't taking responsibility. She was trying to negotiate her way out of consequences. And more than that, she still wanted to control the narrative, settle quietly, keep the family split in half, let people believe it was just a misunderstanding. That wasn't enough anymore because this story wasn't just about the will. It was about my father's legacy and how someone tried to rewrite it when he could no longer speak. I told Janet, no deal. Let it go to ruling. She nodded. I could tell she agreed. And a week later, we were back in court. The judge looked tired. The probate calendar was packed. But when he opened our file, he straightened his posture. This one wasn't routine. He reviewed everything aloud, the testimony, the statements, the inconsistencies in the new will. Then he said, "It is the opinion of this court that the revised will submitted by Miss Hannah Whitaker was executed under conditions that meet the legal standard of undue influence. The decedent, Mr. Thomas Whitaker, was not in a sound state to knowingly authorize a full disinheritance of his eldest daughter, and no credible reason has been presented as to why such a decision would have occurred naturally." He turned to face both sides. Therefore, the will dated 6 months prior to Mr. Whitaker's passing will be reinstated as the controlling legal document. Just like that, it was done. I was officially restored as an equal heir, half the estate, half the property, half the legacy. But more importantly, the truth was now part of the record. After the hearing, I didn't look for Hannah. I thought she'd leave immediately, but she didn't. She waited outside the courthouse and asked to speak with me. I stepped aside with her into a quiet corner of the lot. She looked exhausted. No anger left. No mask, not just a girl who'd run out of stories to hide behind. She said, "I didn't think you'd fight back. You never did when we were younger." I replied, "That's because you never tried to erase me before." She nodded. Looked down. "I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. But it was something. I didn't forgive her. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I did walk away without another word. Because her apology wasn't for me, it was for her. And I wasn't going to carry her guilt any further. A few weeks later, I received access to my half of the accounts, the home, and my dad's personal papers. That's when I found it. A handwritten letter, tucked into a box of old documents labeled private. It wasn't long, just a few sentences, shaky but clear. To my daughters, if something happens to me and things get messy, please know I loved you both in my own way. I didn't always say it well, but I'm proud of you. And I hope you find a way to be better to each other than I was to you. That letter broke me, because even in the end, even in the middle of all that silence, he knew. He knew there'd be a storm. And part of him hoped we'd weather it together. We didn't, but we survived it apart. I kept the house for a while, cleaned it out slowly, room by room. Each drawer held a memory, a question, or something I didn't realize I'd forgotten. Eventually, I sold it. Too much pain in the walls. I split the proceeds the way he wanted, evenly. Every cent. Because, unlike Hannah, I didn't need to take it all to feel seen. People still ask me how I had the strength to go through with it. My answer is simple. Because someone had to. Someone had to say, "No, this isn't right." Someone had to stand up for the version of my father that remembered both his daughters. Not just the one who was there in the final weeks. Not just the one who had a pen ready when his mind started slipping. He wasn't perfect, but he tried. And I wasn't going to let the last chapter of his life be. Written by Lies.Hannah, and I haven't spoken since that day in the parking lot. I think we both know we've crossed a line that doesn't fade over time, but the rest of the family, they know now, and they see me dot at the next family gathering. My aunt hugged me and whispered, "You did the right thing." He'd be proud. That's all I needed, not the money, not even the house dot, just that someone finally said it out loud. Dot. So here's my message to anyone out there. If someone tries to silence you, erase your place in a story you lived. Don't shrink. Don't accept the edited version of the truth. Dig. Fight. Fight. Because the past doesn't belong to the loudest. Voice. It belongs to the one brave enough to tell it without fear. And sometimes when the will fails, the truth writes itself.